Good morning, people. Welcome on in, people. How are we doing on a fine Monday morning? 2 weeks into the third rotation. And people, this is going to be a big week. This week we're going to learn about macroeconomics. We're going to learn about what I'm calling is macro school, how we measure economic health, because ultimately on Friday and then going into next week, we're going to learn about how do we fix, economic problems, right? Using economic policies such as fiscal and monetary policy. That's going to be the goal of all of this, all right? But how are you guys doing out there? How are we doing? How's my fourth hour doing? My friends, right? How you guys doing on this fine morning? A lot to talk about, a lot to do today. And remember, the town hall meeting project used to be a project. Now it's kind of just go on there and make sure you can identify who is in support of what and who's not going to be in support of what, right? So make sure you guys turn that in tonight at some point, your town hall meeting assignment. And then we're just going to kind of chip away at this week. Decent, tired, hungry. Oh no. Pretty hungry too, people. I'll probably get some cereal or something after this. You got your coffee though? You guys got your coffee? I totally did not do that over the weekend. Well, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to be doing homework over the weekend. The weekend's supposed to be where you're sleeping, eating tons of food, not being tired or hungry. Right? Enjoying things that you want to do. But you should have some time today. Hopefully I'll give you guys some time today to work a little bit on your town hall project. You should have had a lot of time on Friday though, I feel like. But no coffee. Can't be me. Cannot be me. All right, let's get to the attendance in the chat, which is actually going to kind of be a warm-up for what we're going to learn about today. And here's your attendance in the chat. It says, how is our economy doing right now? And what measures would you look at in order to support your answer? All right, so how do you think the economy is doing right now? Obviously, asking this question today is a lot different than, when I've usually asked this question over, the 7 years I've taught. I think that you guys kind of know what the economy looks like right now, but what measures do you look at, right? What measures do you look at? Like, how do you know the economy is doing good or bad? Like, what statistics, what measures do you use generally to support your answer, right? So, imagine if you and your friend are kind of just talking, whatever, talking about, the economy, right? Like a lot of people do, right? How do you think the economy is doing, and what measures would you use to support your answer? In other words, like if you were to go to Google, right, what would you type in on Google? What would you try to look up? What would you try to research, right? Measures. Okay. So that's going to be your little warm-up in the chat. All right, so while you guys are doing that, let me get to some announcements and kind of show you what we're doing this week. Like I said, the big announcement is make sure you get that town hall project done or assignment done. Remember, that's going to be summative points. We're not going to have a lot of summative points in this last and final rotation, right? Because I'm not going to give you a test right before you ultimately take the final exam. So, it's important that you do that. But this is what we're going to look at. This is what we're going to be doing here this week. Let me pull it up, and then as you guys do that, I'll probably pull it up and kind of look at it with the notes. People, I want measures, right? Here's one. Unemployment rate, right? What else do we look at? What other measures do we look at in order to identify economic health, right? All right, but while you guys are doing that, right, look at this. So I just posted this on Google Classroom. Instead of, the usual, right, where we lecture a little bit and do some notes, and then I usually give you some sort of assignment that follows, right, to, prove to me that you understand, you were paying attention, and you understand, the concepts that we talked about. This is going to be for 4 days, all right? So today we're going to learn about GDP. See how it says day 1, GDP. We're going to learn about GDP today and why GDP is a measure of economic health. So this is your warm-up right here. So whatever you put in Google, just copy and paste and put that in here. And then today's going to be all about GDP. These are the notes that we're going to do today. So anything in the blue, make sure you put that in. And remember, right, this isn't just, to get assignment points. People, this is going to be what you're going to use on the final exam, right? So make sure you take good notes today, right? Make sure you fill this out really accurately. That way, when you get a question on the final exam, right, it's open note. At least this year it is, right? So definitely, I would make sure you do this pretty well, all right? And then after each day of like note guide, right, there's usually some sort of thing. So here's the little short assignment that you're gonna do after you take all the notes, right? So after you take all the notes, right, you should be able to do this on your own. This right here, okay, this little thing right here. And then tomorrow we're gonna learn about unemployment. Here are the unemployment notes that I want you to copy down, and then what you're going to do after the unemployment notes in Google Meet is you're going to complete this little practice right here. And then day 3 on Wednesday, we're going to learn about inflation, right? And then inflation, on Wednesday we're actually going to watch a video. We're going to watch a video in Google Meet after the content, and I think the video is about like 20 minutes, so it won't be outrageous. And then day 4 will be Thursday. We're going to learn about the business cycle, which sometimes can be kind of complex. It won't take all that long. What I'm planning for is Thursday will be sort of a catch-up day, right? Like if you're kind of behind a little bit on any part of this huge assignment here, 6-page assignment. Thursday will serve as a day to sort of catch up, and then I had this as of right now due on Thursday night. Okay. All right. So I would have this up, and I would sort of follow along. When we're doing notes and then put these in here, right? Do not fall behind on this. You do not want to be looking at a blank document here on Thursday, right? And remember, again, open note final exam. It cannot be any easier. So make sure you guys take good notes. All right, let's get this. What you guys are putting in the chat here. Let's see your responses. Okay, so it says, crazy and stupid how people act on Twitter when politicians state new economic deals, says Irwin. It's good, I think. I would just say not good as it was because of COVID, but I think you look at how much the dollar's worth. So Mason says you can look at the value of the U.S. dollar as an indicator of economic measure. I would say let's say it kind of depends. As a matter of fact, when the dollar is really good, when the dollar quote unquote appreciates, gains value, generally what's going to follow is gonna be an economic, not like recession, but like a downturn. Generally GDP decreases when the dollar's good, and the reason is because Americans are gonna go buy more foreign goods and foreigners are gonna buy less American goods when the dollar is valuable. So like it actually is kind of weird like that. But anyway, I don't know, dude, says Michael. Not good. All right. Not as good as Orange Man keeps saying. It's been better. I have no idea. Not good because of unemployment and COVID. There we go. There we got a macro measure, unemployment rate, right? We're gonna look at unemployment rates, and that's gonna kind of tell us is the economy good or bad, right? We can look at unemployment rates. We're gonna learn something called the natural rate of unemployment, which is gonna be 5%. So if the unemployment rate is 5% or less, the economy is good. The unemployment rate can actually get too low, and we'll learn about that. And if the unemployment rate is generally above 5%, then we can, sort of conclude that there is some sort of cyclical unemployment. There's some sort of problems with the economy. I think it's doing well. Our economy is fair. You could look on the stock market to support this. So a lot of people do use the stock market as an indicator for macro success. We're actually going to stay away from that. We're going to stay away from that. The stock market is not a good measure of economic success. However, most Americans, for whatever reason, do use that, right? So that's probably why Gavin put that in there, because that's what you've heard, right? That's what most people use, right? That like when the economy's doing well, they're like, hey, look at the stock market, it's doing well. Well, the stock market doesn't reflect, what it's like to live in the U.S., right? Most people don't have money in the stock market, so when the stock market goes up, it doesn't really help their incomes or anything, and really it just we'll talk more about that. But like it's more like inflation and inflated stock market, right? People buying their own, or corporations buying their own stocks, sort of, inflate prices and whatnot. It could be a decent measure, but we're going to look at a little bit more basic measures, right? GDP, unemployment, inflation, things like that. I'm not super sure, but I don't think it's good. I don't know. Inflation, there's another macro measure. Yes, Lexus, I looked it up, and it said that the American dollar is supposed to drop in value by 20% when the vaccine is distributed. You check your resources, right? And again, kind of like the stock market, again, the U.S. dollar isn't going to be the best measure of economic success, right? Because when the economy is good, right, that generally will cause the dollar to go up, and then when the dollar is up, that's going to cause the economy to go ultimately back down. So what a lot of countries do is they sort of deflate their currency on purpose. They sort of devalue their currency on purpose to incentivize exports, right? So, but yeah. Anything else, people? You guys all put it on there? Why are you guys saying, I don't know? What is that supposed to mean? What is that supposed to mean? All right. Let's get to it. Let's start macroeconomics. All right, so people, you guys all know what we're doing, right? You guys are all going to be filling in this note guide, right, as we go through. And if you fall behind a little bit, no worries, right? I will put a copy of the notes on Google Classroom, so don't worry. But try to just keep following along, and then ultimately by the end of the hour, we're gonna do this little portion right here, and then probably also complete your town hall assignment. Okay, all right. So macroeconomics. Your warm up was this, right? If you and your friend are in a conversation and your friend's like, hey, the economy's doing good or the economy's doing bad, right? What would your argument be and how would you support it, right? Hopefully we're going to be a lot better at that, next week, right? The economy is good because of this. The economy is bad because of this. And here's why and here's how I know, all right? And then later on, like I talked about, the goal is, one, you can identify the macro measures, right? You can identify economic health. Secondly is you'll learn how to fix it, right? You'll learn what Congress and what the Federal Reserve should do in order to fix whatever economic problems that we have, right? So measure the economic problems, identify the economic problems, and then identify ways in which we can fix the economy. Would be pretty good. All right. So what is macroeconomics? We've learned the difference between micro and macro. I think like on day one, right? Just the definitions, right? Macro is studying the economy as a whole. Micro is studying the economy, in small economic units, right? Markets and other sorts. For the most of the class, right, we've been in microeconomics. We've been looking at supply and demand for bananas, right? We've looked at market structures like monopolies and oligopolies and things like that, analyzing different industries and markets, right? That's all microeconomics. Macroeconomics is looking at the economy entirely, right, as a whole, right? Instead of the supply and demand for bananas, right, it's the supply and demand for everything by everyone, right? Large, view of the economy, right? So macroeconomics is a study of large economy as a whole, is a study of the big picture, all right? So it says, why study the whole economy? Well, believe it or not, macroeconomics is a very new field of study, right? We talked about Adam Smith, right, the founder of economics, right? He wrote the Wealth of Nations in 1776, right? With the idea of the invisible hand, and don't get involved. The government should not get involved in the economy. If left alone, buyers and sellers are naturally going to come together at a price and quantity that's going to be most efficient in the market, right? Where no shortages or surpluses occur, right? Blah blah blah. And then a lot of his theories eventually started getting debunked, right? And this is where John Maynard Keynes entered into the picture, and he's kind of regarded as the founder of macroeconomics, because he basically was like, what is the point of studying economics if we never implement economic policy, right? What's the point, right? What's the point of studying economics if all we're told is we're not supposed to do anything? The government's not supposed to get involved in the marketplace, right? And really what came about is John Maynard Keynes obviously studied economics, and during the Great Depression, right, he looked out his window and was like, wow, there's massive lines, right? Unemployment of 25%. People are hungry, right? And all we're supposed to do is wait around. His famous quote is, in the long run, we are all dead, right? Because basically, remember, Adam Smith says, in the long run, the economy is going to self-correct. In the long run, if you leave it alone, it will fix itself, right? Which is sort of true, right? If you study economics, classical economists. But John Maynard Keynes says, in the long run, we're all dead. I'm not about to wait 20 years for unemployment to fix itself, right? We can do things in the here and the now to fix whatever macro measures are apparent, right? So macro is created to, one, measure economic health, because beforehand we didn't, right? We didn't measure GDP and unemployment, inflation rates, and things like that. And then ultimately implement policies to fix it. And then look at those macro measures and see, did the policies work or did they not work? And then change the policies in the future. And that's the whole idea of macroeconomics. Study economic health and then ultimately fix it. And that's what we're going to do in this class. All right, John Maynard Keynes, modern macroeconomics, right? Okay, so that's what Unit 4 is going to be all about. Our last and final unit is we're going to learn about economic health, economic policy, and then lastly, we'll talk about a little bit about globalization if we get there, how our economies interconnected to one another. All right, so I want you guys to think about this week as you guys are econ doctors, right? Pretend you're econ doctors. You're not doctors yet, right? But you're going to econ, medical school, right? And you're here to learn about the various economic diseases, right? To ultimately learn, how to fix those economic diseases, or combat, rather, those economic diseases. So the first disease is going to be called slow economic growth. All right, so we're going to learn that the medical equipment needed to identify that there is a disease of slow economic growth is going to be something called GDP, and specifically real GDP. Real GDP. Oops. Go back to here for a second. Oops. Try right here. Right? So we're going to learn about the disease of slow economic growth, and we're going to look at GDP to measure, or real GDP to measure, is there or is there not slow economic growth occurring? Okay? I'm going to go kind of fast, though, all right? But I will post a copy of this today, I promise. I'll post a copy of these notes today. So if you do go too fast, don't you worry. Do not worry. I know it's probably hard. You guys are probably like watching it, and then you're going back and then typing and then going back to the other screen. But yeah. All right, moving on. All right. Now you don't write any of this, right? I'm just kind of like showing you guys like, what we're going to learn about and all that, okay? I got you, Mason. All right, so then we're going to learn about unemployment tomorrow. We're going to learn about we're going to need to calculate something called the natural rate of unemployment. We're going to also learn how the government calculates that unemployment rate. Subtract that to identify cyclical unemployment. That's going to tell us, is the economy good or bad? Is there really a disease of unemployment, or is there not really a disease of unemployment going on? Cyclical unemployment is what we're going to look at. We're also going to look at the disease of price instability. We're going to learn something called the Consumer Price Index. How do we measure inflation? How do we measure deflation? Right? Why is inflation bad, and why is also deflation bad, and why do we want prices to be stable? And then right. So that's what we're going to do today. We're gonna learn about what is GDP, what is included, what is not included in the calculation of GDP, what's the difference between expenditure and income approach, why is GDP per capita not a good measure of standard of living, or the best measure of standard of living, but also why is GDP not a perfect measure of standard of living, right? Got lots to do. All right, so there it is. There's the three major economic goals, and really the three macro measures we're going to look at to identify economic health is one, we want to promote economic growth, we want to limit unemployment, we also want to keep prices stable. But yeah, like I said, today we're just going to focus on GDP. So goal number one is to promote economic growth in other words, to increase GDP. We want to increase GDP. What is GDP? What does that mean, and how is it calculated? That's what we're about to do. All right, so blah, blah, blah. There's GDP. There's the definition of GDP. And like I said, it's the most important measure of growth is GDP. Are we producing more things of value than we were last year? Right? That's what we're talking about with GDP in terms of growth. Are we producing more things of value this year than we are last year? And if we are, right, that means the economy is growing. Right? That means there's probably more jobs available, hopefully more high-paying jobs available, right? And our economy is growing. That'd be a good measure of economic success. So what is GDP? All right? This definition is very, very precise and specific. If you know this definition, right, you're going to be able to identify what is included and what is not included in the calculation of GDP. So GDP is going to be measured in dollars. It is the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given year. So like I said, first, GDP is going to be measured in dollars, right? We're not going to simply measure the quantity of goods and services produced in a country, right? We're going to measure the dollar value times the quantity of those goods and services produced in a country, right? If we simply measured quantity of goods produced, right, can see why that's not going to be a good measure of economic health, because say we just make, billions and billions of, $1 valued Happy Meal toys, right? Incomes in this country are probably going to be relatively low, right? If we're producing things of such, low value, right? If we're producing instead, cars and, medical equipment and, technology, things like that, right? A higher dollar value, in other words, right, and a high GDP from there, right, we can probably infer that and assume that, incomes are high, right? Standard of living in this country is probably pretty high if we're producing things of that kind of value. So yeah, we're always going to measure it in dollars, not just going to simply measure it in terms of quantity of goods and services produced. Okay? Secondly, we're going to look at only final goods and services. In other words, we're not going to double count things, right? So, for example, like a car, right? A car itself has many goods produced within the car, right? Like tires itself, there's, the tires are bought and put on the car from some other firm. Speakers, like Bose speakers, are put into the car, and those speakers are bought from another firm, and obviously those speakers have value. The glass, the seats, etc., right? If we measure the tires on the car and then also measure the car itself, we're going to double count the tires, right? So what we're only going to do is we're only going to measure final goods. So if it's an intermediate good, it's a good that's produced, right, and has value and then is sold, but it's put on like into a final good. We're only going to measure the final good itself. We're not going to measure any sort of intermediate goods. All right, and then also we're going to look at only in 1 year, right? So GDP is measured in 1 year, and it's January 1st to January 1st. So what is being produced today is going to be measured in GDP of the year 2021, not in the year 2020. Right? So any good that's used, a used good that's produced in the year prior, is not going to be calculated in this year's, GDP. And then it has to be within the country's borders, right? So it has to be produced within the U.S. That's why it's called gross domestic product. Doesn't matter who makes it. Doesn't matter, what nationality, the company is from or anything like that. It's just where is it made, right? So if Toyota makes a car in the U.S., it's going to increase the U.S. GDP, right? It does not matter the company. If Ford makes a car in Korea, right, in South Korea, that's going to be South Korea's GDP, not the U.S. GDP, right? That's called GNP, right? If Ford makes a car in Korea, that would increase the U.S. GNP, right? Gross national product. It's going to measure U.S. companies. We're measuring, where are they made, right? And the reason we're going to be more so focused on GDP rather than GNP is because if it's made in the U.S., right, it's going to reflect a better standard of living in the U.S. than GNP would, right? Because if we're making cars in the U.S., again, who's making the cars? U.S. employees, right? U.S. employees are going to receive, income generated from that revenue produced in producing the car, right? That's what we want to look at. We want to look at standard of living for a country, right? So we want to look at who's making those goods within a country, not what company is making the goods. Okay? All right. So again, what is not included in GDP? Again, we're not going to measure intermediate goods because again, intermediate goods are going to cause double counting to occur, right? Again, we're not going to count the tire on the car. We're going to count the car because in counting the car, the value of the car, we're counting the value of the tires, all right, and the radio and everything else included in it. Number two, we're not going to count any sort of non-productive transaction. Non-productive transaction, right? So household production, the sale of stocks, the sale of real estate, right? We're not counting that. We're only going to count something that's produced, right? It has to be something that's produced. So financial transactions, right? Or like stocks, for example, right? If it says, Bill makes money by selling his stocks on the stock market, kind of like Gavin did, right? Gavin won the stock market game. That was not a good or service being produced. All that we did was we bought stocks at a lower price value and sold them at a higher value, right? We didn't produce a good or a service. Now, if someone, they're a stockbroker, right? That's what they do for a living, and they give stock advice on which stocks to buy, right? Now that would be included, right? Because that person is providing a service, right? A stockbroker, right? So it has to be a good and it has to be a service. Real estate, right? If someone buys land in Florida and then sells it to somebody else, right? Again, that land was not produced or created, right? It was just, we're just transferring, something along, right? And the value of that may have changed. Okay. Anthony has a really good question. It says, who had the highest GDP last year? It was the United States, and we're going to look at that. Actually, I have a bunch of tables and stuff I want to show you guys, but the U.S. had the highest nominal GDP last year. All right. Anyway, used goods, right? Again, we're not going to measure used goods because they've already been counted in the year beforehand, right? So anything that's used or old, we're not going to include. We're not going to count. And then last but not least, we're not going to count any sort of non-market or illegal activities. Like I said, household production, right? If you babysit, your younger siblings, right? You're producing a service, but again, it's not being brought to market, right? Like your parents aren't paying you, and you're not filing taxes on it. Now, the government doesn't know about it, in other words, so that's not going to be included in the GDP. It has to be some sort of market, activity, and then obviously anything illegal, right? The black market, right? The underground market, the market that cannot be seen, is not going to be included. So any drugs and things like that, or unpaid work, obviously is not going to be included. All right. So again, it's all about where is it made, not who makes it. So it says, what is the most American-made car you could possibly purchase, right? Last year, what was the most American-made car you could possibly purchase, right? Say you wanted to, you were very patriotic, right? You wanted to buy a car that was the most American-made. In other words, when you buy that car, that money goes mostly to American workers and stays within the country, right? What car would you purchase in order to make that happen? Well, believe it or not, it's not Ford, it's not Chevy, right? It generally has been for the longest time. Toyota has been the most American-made car because most of the parts are made in the U.S. and that money stays in the U.S. and goes to U.S. workers. But last year, it actually ended up being Ford for I think one of the first times ever. The Ford Ranger was the most American-made car. Jeep has been up there in recent years, but for a while, ever since I've taught, it's usually been Honda or Toyota, which is pretty crazy, right? And when you go on, when you're driving around and you see like bumper stickers, right, like Buy American, right? We're globalized now, right? Supply chain. Most of our parts are not made here in the U.S. So what is American? It doesn't necessarily mean like the make of it, right? Just looking at the vehicle itself, right? What was the most value added here in the U.S. In the production of that vehicle, right? So you got Ford, you got Jeep, you got Tesla, Honda, etc. Right? And here's some other ones. Like I said, when I taught for a while, the Toyota Camry for a long time was the most American-made car in the U.S. Toyota Camry. So again, just remember that, right? Exactly, yeah. Toyota is good, right? Again, a lot of people don't buy Toyota because they think all the money is going elsewhere, right? Again, you got to do your research and see where is that car produced, right? If that's what means, if that what matters the most to you, right? Is giving back to the U.S., right? All right. Anyway, so calculating GDP, how do we get this number? And then we're going to look at who has the highest GDPs in the world, right? There's two ways in which to do it. We're going to do number one, but I'm going to talk about another way to do it that would also give you the same number. But yeah, the number one is called the expenditures approach. Expenditures means spending. So we're going to add up all total spending in a given year, right? And that's going to give us our GDP as long as it's spending on those final goods and services produced domestically within a given year, right? As long as it meets that GDP criteria, right? And we add up all spending on that. From there, it's going to give us the value of everything produced in terms of a good or service in this country, as long as it's the final good, right? In a given year, right? That's the idea. Is like, again, if I spend $10 on this coffee, thing, right? This coffee cup, coffee mug, right? Keeps my coffee warm. If I spend $10 on it, and this is a good or service, or this is a good produced domestically in this country, $10 would be added to the GDP. Because when I spend money, it tells the value of the good itself, right? I know this is $10 in value because I was willing to spend $10 for that good. So if we add up all total spending, that's going to equal the total amount of value of goods and services produced domestically in a given year. We could do that, or we could add up total income generated from those goods. Not income for everything, but income in the production of those specific GDP goods. Again, so if this good is produced here in the U.S., right, and I spend $10 on it, $10 would be the GDP added, right, in the production of this good. But I can add up income as well. If I spend $10 on this mug, right, whoever made this receives $10, right? And that would also be, the same GDP, right? In theory, if we add up all total spending and we add up all total income, those numbers should be the same. Because again, when you spend $10, that becomes $10 in income for somebody else. So either way you do it, you shouldn't, be able to get the same exact number. Total spending or total income, again, on those goods. We're not just going to add up total income in the U.S. and total spending in the U.S. It has to be spending on final goods and services produced domestically in a given year. It has to be income generated from final goods and services produced domestically in a given year. All right? And then that would give us our total GDP. So we have 4 components of GDP. What are the different, how do we slice up the GDP, right? What's most of our GDP, right? What is most of the goods, the value of the goods that we produce, right? Most of the goods in terms of value that we produce is called consumer spending. Most goods that are produced in the U.S. is for consumption spending, like consumers buying it, right? Subway sandwiches, T-shirts, things like that. 68% of our U.S. GDP is the production of those goods that ultimately, at the end of the day, a consumer buys it, right? So again, it's like phones, right? It's like, mugs, things like that. That's consumer spending. 68% of our GDP. So remember that when we start talking about fixing the economy, like we're going to do on Friday, and then going into next week, what we're going to be focused on in this class, more so than anything, is demand side economics. We're going to be focused on increasing consumption spending, right? Getting consumers to buy more goods, because when consumers buy more goods and services, right, more revenue is going to be, afforded to businesses. Businesses that have more revenue are going to buy more resources. In other words, employ more workers. Workers have more money. They're going to go buy more goods, right? That's what's going to increase our GDP and correct whichever market, issues we have. So consumer spending is going to be the big one. So who else can spend money, right? We're looking at the expenditure approach. Who else can spend money in our economy? Consumers spend money. They're going to make the majority of our GDP. But who else can spend money is businesses. And we're going to call that investment. Businesses spending money on capital goods. And you guys know what capital goods are, right? We learned about that already. We learned about the production possibility curve. Capital goods are goods that are used to produce other goods, right? Here's an example of a capital good. My microphone is an example of a capital good, right? It's a good. I bought it. Now I could use it for like personal reasons and whatnot, but I am using it to produce a service, right? So like if this was if this was a business, right, and like it kind of is a business, right? This is Grand Blanc High School, right? Is the business, right? And I'm working for Grand Blanc High School. This is a tool used by the business to produce the service of education, right? So that's the idea. Investment, right? Businesses buy things in order to produce more things, right? Like Domino's buys delivery vehicles. Domino's buys, cash registers and things like that. Domino's buys pizza ovens and stuff like that. The spending on those goods is what we're gonna count as investment. Businesses spending money on goods that are ultimately going to be used to produce more goods. You got a blue mic? Yeah, these mics are nice. These mics are really nice. Yeah. Okay, anyway. All right. So businesses spending money on goods. Add up all that, right? It's going to be make up a portion of our GDP. I think it's around 10 to 15%. Number 3 is going to be government spending, right? Governments also spend money. Governments spend a lot of money, right? Governments spend money on hiring people to fix roads and bridges, and they spend a lot of money on national defense. They spend money on schools and things like that. The Yeti mic. Yep. So add up all spending on that. Now we're not going to include transfer payments. We're not going to include, money on like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, things like that, welfare. Right? We're talking about, again, goods or services being produced. Spending on those things is going to be included in the expenditure approach of GDP. And then who else can spend money? We got consumers. We got businesses spend money. We got government spend money. Right? Who else buys things in our economy? Well, foreigners do. Foreigners can buy U.S. goods. So how do we get the value of what foreigners are buying from us? We also have to include what is the value of what we're buying from them. So if this number is positive, what that means is foreigners are buying more goods from us than we're buying from them. We're going to use the net the net value. So exports minus imports. An export is when a good leaves the country, and imports when a good enters the country, right? So an export, who's buying an export? A foreigner is, right? Someone from Canada is buying a U.S. good, that's going to be an export. An import is when an American buys a foreign good, maybe from Canada. So if exports minus imports and this dollar value is positive, that means, again, foreigners are buying more U.S. goods than we're buying from them. Generally in the U.S., net exports is negative. Generally in the U.S., Americans buy more foreign goods than foreigners buy from us. Okay? So anyways, there it is. GDP equals C, I, G, XN. Right? So that is part of your note guide, right? So C is consumer spending, I is investment, G is government spending, and then XN or NX, right? People write it differently, does not matter at all. That refers to net exports. All right? Give you guys a second to copy that down. We're almost there, people. We're almost there. I don't want to lecture for the full hour, so if we need to finish it up, we'll finish it up. I think we're pretty close, though. I think we're pretty close, though. Oh, people! The Board of Education has that board meeting tonight, right? So we're going to kind of figure out what the plan is for school next semester. So remember to tune in to the board meeting if it's available. I'm pretty sure it's going to be available on Zoom to the public, but I'll summarize it tomorrow, right? If you guys don't tune in. What does the N stand for? Oh, net. Exports net or net exports. Yeah. Okay. All right. So again, this is what you guys are going to do. I'll do a couple of these, but this is basically what your problem set is. What your practice is afterwards is it included or is it not included? If it is included, give me the component. Okay. So number one, $10 for movie tickets at NCG Cinema, right? That is included. It's produced within the U.S. in Grand Blanc, right? The service of going to the movie. So that is included, right? It's produced here in the U.S. and that's going to be C, consumer spending, right? Consumers buying it. Okay. Number two, $5 million increase in U.S. defense spending expenditures, right? So is that included? Yes, right? If they're buying goods or services produced domestically here in the U.S. And then which component would that be? That'd be G, government, right? Government spending money on goods. Number three, a $45 for a used textbook at MSU would not be counted, right? Why? Because it's a used good. We don't count used goods because it was already counted in a year previously, so we don't even have to identify the component. It's not included. Ford makes new $2 million factory in Michigan. That's going to be included, right? And that's going to be I for investment, right? It's produced here in the U.S. The factory is produced here in the U.S. And we're talking about a business spending money, right? Investment. $20,000 Toyota made and sold in Mexico. We're not going to count it because it's not made in the U.S. $10,000 profit from selling stocks, again, not included because it's not a good or service being produced, right? We're not talking about giving stock advice or anything like that. It's just someone personally buying stocks for their own profit. $15,000 truck made in the U.S., sold in Canada, that would be included, and that's going to be XN, right? Foreign, foreigners buying it, net exports, that would be included, right? Because it's made in the U.S. That's all that really matters. $10,000 tuition to attend college, consumer spending, right? Consumers buying a service here in the U.S. is going to be included. That'd be C, right? $120 Social Security payment to Pete, not going to be included because, again, that's just moving money around. It's taxing individuals and then giving that money to someone else, right? We're not actually producing anything, so that's not going to be included. Again, that's a government transfer payment. That's not a good or service being produced. And then last but not least, a farmer buys a new $100,000 tractor, that would be included, right? And a farmer is a business, so that'd be an investment. That'd be I, and that is a tractor produced here, in the U.S., right? So that's kind of how we do it, right? We add up all the value of goods and services produced domestically in a given year, and we try to sort of compartmentalize that, right? Like give them components, C, I, G, X, N, see where that spending is taking place, and that number is what GDP is, right? That number is what GDP is. So if we just added up, these goods, what was included, 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 10, add up all that, that's the idea of GDP, the value of what was produced here in the U.S., okay? All right. All right, let's look at some maps. People are probably not going to be able to finish GDP today. I don't want to rush through things. rather slow down and have you guys actually like learn about it and stuff. All right, anyway, so here we go. We got GDP by country. This is in the year 2019. We don't have 2020 stats really up yet, but I'm sure it'd be much the same. The U.S. has the highest GDP in the world. The U.S. has had the highest GDP in the world for quite a while, but will that be sustained in the future? We'll see. We'll see, right? I know China's getting closer and closer each and every year, but really that's the country that comes the closest in terms of producing goods of value in the world, right? Obviously, European Union's not a country, right? But they just put that up there, kind of for statistical reasons, right? Kind of see that U.S. produces more of all of Europe combined, and then you got China, Japan, Germany, etc. Right? But yeah, the U.S. GDP is 21,430. Oh no, this is in millions. 21,439. 21. Wait, what the heck? What? In millions. Yeah. U.S. has the highest GDP in the world, for sure. The largest economy in the world, for sure. U.S. GDP. Yeah, trillions. 20 trillion. Close to 21 trillion. It's weird how it's measured in millions, but they give more commas. It's throwing me off here. Anyway, all right. Okay. Here's another cool map. It just kind of shows like where our most goods and services of value produced. Generally, it's in the northern hemisphere, right? It's U.S., Europe, Asia, India, Japan. Okay. Not much in South America, Africa, or Australia for the most part. This is also a really cool map. Again, the U.S. is a huge economy, people. Right, we're a huge country. So what this map shows us is each state in terms of what they produce of value and what it would compare to another country. Right. In other words, Texas, in terms of what Texas produces of value, is equal to the economy of Canada. Okay. Florida is equal to the economy of Mexico. California is equal to the economy of the UK. New York, South Korea, Michigan, Austria, Ohio, Switzerland, right? Like the U.S. is huge, right? We produce a lot of things of value relative to most of the world. Russia slimmed down a bit. Yeah, it's a little sus. What you doing over there, Japan? Yeah, Japan's got a very high GDP per capita, GDP per person, which is pretty crazy to look at. All right. So we're gonna end in talking about this, and I want to show you like a one little 1 minute clip, and then we'll kind of end in class right there, and then you guys can kind of work on this, and then also that town hall assignment. So it says, does GDP accurately measure standard of living? In other words, what it's like to live in a country, right? Is it good to live in a certain country, or is it not that good to live in a certain country? So does GDP accurately measure standard of living? It says standard of living can be measured in part by how well the economy is doing, how high a GDP is in a certain country. But think about this, right? If GDP is very, very high in a country, but there's a lot of people in a certain country, right? Is the standard of living going to be high? So why do we sort of compare standard of living with GDP? Here's the idea, right? If GDP is very high in a country, more specifically GDP per capita, GDP per person, right? What that probably means is that country has high incomes. Does that make sense, right? Say the GDP per capita in a country is $50,000. $50,000 GDP per capita. What that means is, what is the total of goods and services produced domestically divided by the population, right? That means that the average person in a country produces $50,000 worth of stuff. Does that make sense? If GDP per capita is $50,000, the average person in that country produces $50,000 worth of goods and services. So what you can infer is, if I produce $50,000 worth of goods and services, my income should be close to $50,000, right? If you own and operate a lemonade stand, right, and you sell $100 worth of lemonade, how much income are you going to make? $100, right? So that's kind of the idea, is if there's a high GDP per capita, a high GDP per person, right? That's what GDP per capita is, GDP divided by the population. you could probably assume that incomes are high. And again, if incomes are high, that probably means there's good access to education, there's probably good access to healthcare, things that probably make a country desirable to live in. Standard of living is the idea. Okay? That's the idea. Is that there's a high GDP per capita, what we usually assume that that country has a high standard of living. If the average person in a country makes $100,000 worth of goods, that person's probably making $100,000 in income, it probably is a pretty decent place to live, right? That's the average, right? Again, people in that country probably have access to a lot of things, in the developed world, right? Okay, so let's look at GDP per capita real quick. So it says, what are the 20 most populated countries in the world? China, India, U.S., Indonesia, Brazil, right? So you can imagine, right, if these countries have the highest population, they probably have high GDPs as well. But again, we want to know, what is GDP per capita, right? What is the average amount of goods and services value that someone produces in a country? So in the U.S., we have a decent GDP per capita. It's pretty high. It's in the top 20 in the world, right? $57,000. So again, what that means is incomes in this country should be, on average, around $57,000. And I think incomes are pretty close to that. Now median incomes, you guys know what median is, right? Median, right? Like you cross out like all the way until you get to the middle, right? Median incomes are very minimal, I believe, in this country. I believe they're between 30 and 40,000, right? Because more income gets pulled to the top and whatnot. But yeah, GDP per capita, right? So Liechtenstein, right? The average person in this country, Liechtenstein, makes $140,000 worth of goods and services. That was in 2009. That's when I graduated high school. Right, so yeah, Norway generally is regarded as the best country in the world to live in, as the number one HDI, Human Development Index, the lowest infant mortality rate, some of the best education in the world, the earliest retirement rates, includes everything. Generally, Norway is regarded as one of the best countries in the world to live in. Yeah, so an experienced engineer's salary. All right, so I want to end with this, right? It says, business news. Here's a little political cartoon, which you guys have had experience looking at political cartoons. Economic growth indicators are up. Economic growth indicators, that's GDP, right? So GDP is up, led by car repairs, divorce costs, open heart surgeries, and toxic waste cleanups. What? Right? So what is this cartoonist saying? This cartoonist is saying that we need to be careful when we look at GDP. Just because the GDP is high in a certain country doesn't necessarily mean that country is great to live in, right? It just means we produce a lot of things of value, and what we're producing of value might be, harmful things, right? Divorce costs, car repairs, open heart surgeries, toxic waste cleanups. It's good that we have those services available in our country, which is good, right? But again, if that's what most of our value is and what we're actually producing as of a country, right, it probably isn't the best thing in the world, right? So I'm going to show you a little clip real quick. It's from Bobby Kennedy, and he's going to talk about GNP, but again, GNP is very similar to GDP. Again, we're measuring value of goods and services produced, and from that we're saying, oh yeah, this country's great because GDP went up. We did great, right? We're producing more things. Again, it's not covers the whole story, okay? All right. I'll keep myself there, it's fine. All right. So let's watch this real quick.
Too much and for too long, we seem to have surrendered personal excellence and community values in the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year. But that gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by that gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwoods and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm, and it counts nuclear warheads and armored cars for the police to fight the riots in our cities. It counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are Americans.
Put an L in the chat, people. L in the chat. Mr. Moore's muted. People, I'll see you guys in Google Meet. And the guy going on a rant. All right, people, I'll see you guys.